So finally, as promised, here we are with part 3 of the Royal Enfield Bike Shed collaboration build, and this is also going to be the genuine first ride. Okay Dan, thanks for the graphic sting, that's very lovely, but what's this bike really about? Well, this is probably the best way of showing it. This bike is all about the stance, it's all about street presence. Now, some of you who've seen some of my previous bikes will know that I am a big fan of an urban brat, and it's a bit hard to escape from that. I do also like cafe races and other bikes, but what I wanted this bike to be was the next iteration of that, and it was really about the stance, it's about the silhouette, and it's about street presence. If you're riding a motorcycle around London, what you want is you want a commanding view, you want the kind of body position that makes you feel in control of the motorcycle. And the thing about these proper kind of upright bikes is really the riding position is much more scrambler than it is anything else. But then what you've got with the brat style, the big fat tyres, is a feeling of a bike that's got a bit more presence, that's a bit more custom, and it's a little bit more of a thing. It's a bit more of a thing of beauty. And you know, to be honest, I'm very much seduced by these brat builds, and especially this sort of take on them where you stick on the fat wheels and the fat tyres. But I'm going to park the bike up now on the side stand, and let's have a look a little bit more of the details and what really makes this bike what it is. So Dan, if you want to come a little bit closer. The first thing that we've said all the way through this build is we've started out with a bike that we already like, the Royal Enfield 650 Twin. It's a great basic motorcycle, and it's got a really, really pretty engine. I love parallel twins and I love V-twins. I like the way they deliver power, because it's not about peak brake horsepower, it's about torque, and it's about the way that power is delivered. Especially if you're riding around the streets of the big city, you want all of that power in the lower rev range. And the donor bike did that. But the donor bike is obviously designed to please lots of people. It's very retro looking, and while it's a great machine and a fantastic base for customizing bikes, we obviously wanted to make something that was going to stand out, and also it had to be a collaboration between Bike Shed and Royal Enfield, and something that they also liked. And we were really excited about creating this brat style silhouette. So there are two key parts to creating that. The first part is obvious, it's all about the wheels. So Dan, I don't know if you want to get in here. I mean, I think you can probably see it on camera, but these wheels really are about presence, and they're the thing that creates the silhouette. And you know, they're built on 16-inch rims. Now, they do have big fat tyres on them, and about 4 or 5 years ago, if you wanted 16-inch rims on your custom bike, there weren't very many good tyre options that would actually allow you to go around corners as well. The first bike I had built like this in 2015 had Coca Becks on it. They're great looking tyres. They look like cartoon tyres. They've got the, you know, the block pattern on them, but they're really square, and they fall into corners, and it's pretty weird. But the good thing about the modern range of 16-inch tyres, or tyres built for 16-inch rims that have been built for the faster Harleys and bikes like the Triumph Bobber and the Speedmaster, is they've got a proper rounded profile on them, and they're made of sticky rubber, and they go around corners. So I get to have my cake and eat it. I get a big fat tyre. I like a black rim and a black tyre, so you just get this big mass of wheel. And of course what you also do then is you match it up at the back with something that looks the same, but obviously isn't exactly the same. Again, back in the old days, we'd have 2 back tyres on. We'd have a back tyre on the front and a back tyre on the back, but this is a proper front tyre and a proper back tyre with profiles made accordingly to make sure that this bike handles as it should and it goes around corners. But yet again, big fat rim, big fat tyre, and this is the first part of the build that really gives the bike that presence. It's probably also the part of the build that costs the most money, and it's the bit that's most difficult to do, because nobody just makes a set of 16-inch wheels for a bike like this. And what you have to do is you have to go somewhere like Hagen, who also built these shocks, and you have to get them to build these rims onto your existing hubs. And that's what we've done here. But I think it's the defining part of the bike for me. But the other thing that really defines this bike in terms of stance, and I'm going to have to drag Dan back up to the front, sorry, making your life a little bit difficult, Dan, is these really big wide bars. Now these bars for me are reminiscent of old school American flat track pullback bars, similar to the kind of bar profile that Triumph have on their Speedmaster, and also you know, there's a little bit of the Steve McQueen in there as well, the old school scrambler, where if I get back on the bike, you get a really wide commanding position, and you know, you've got a bit of presence about you. And on the one hand, You're a little bit wider by a couple of inches than you might be on some other narrower bars. But what happens is, because you've got a little bit of extra leverage, it counteracts the fact that you've got a fat front tyre. So when you're riding around on a bike like this, and I'll let you know shortly when I do my first ride, cornering is just easy peasy. You just leverage as you normally would, pushing or pulling, whichever is your style, steering with your hips, but you really do use the bars on a bike like this, and it's really good for maneuvering in heavy traffic while still giving you that upright riding position and gives you a nice comfortable back as well. So it's about the bars and the wheels in terms of the silhouette, and the silhouette when you're sitting on it as a rider's bike. So getting into the details now, I've always been a big fan at the front end of minimization. So for me, the things that make custom bikes look beautiful are things like reducing the size of the front fender, reducing the size of the clocks and the instruments, getting them to be as small as possible, and pulling the headlight in. So what you're doing is effectively, you're taking all of the front end and you're putting it in the tumble dryer on hot, and you're shrinking everything by as much as you can. And that's what we've got going on here. This is a custom cowl, which was actually designed in CAD, then 3D printed and then reinforced with fiberglass by the guys at Royal Enfield, who've used a separate halo headlight in the front end. So this is a custom one-off piece, which I'll put the lights on in a sec and show you how that looks. But this is very reminiscent of quite a few other custom builders who've done similar things, most notably JVB Moto. They've actually built a unit like this that's a bolt-on for some of the modern Triumphs. And it's been much copied. We copied it for Vicky's Scrambler, her Ducati, and that looks great. Now the Speedo is Motor Gadget, and we've kept the top yoke, we've kept the clamps on there. We've tried to keep this sort of as much of the original parts as possible, but this has been welded in, and sort of a bracket has been created that goes where the key would normally go for this really rather lovely Motor Gadget Speedo that's got its old school looks, but obviously is modern tech. And while we're talking about the front end, that fender is modified, but it comes from Bark, who create fantastic kits for Royal Enfields and for Triumphs. These gaiters are also from Bark, and although they look and feel like rubber, I'm told they're leather. And I said, well, how are they going to be in the rain? Because this is a bike to ride. And the answer was shoe polish. If you're worried about it at all, just keep them polished with shoe polish. I mean, I don't mind that. It's no harder than lubing your chain, so I'll make sure that if I ride these in the wet. But they are actually properly formed, but made of leather. It's a bit of an extravagance, and if this wasn't a show bike, I'd have just put rubber ones on there. But I like it, and I like the fact that Bark made them in the first place. So that's all good. The actual bracket that holds the forks on, a lot of people have asked me where this comes from, but actually that's standard part on the bike, so it's just been painted. Also the handlebars come from Bark as well. So apart from that, in the front end, switch gear is standard. We've got Moto Gadget M-Blaze bar end indicators. I think they're M-Blaze, or maybe they're not actually. Dan can put a caption on to correct me if I've got the name wrong. I really like bar end indicators. They're in the widest part of the bike. They really do show people that you're going around a corner, and they're also visible from the front and the back at the same time when you're turning. So to me, that's a big plus. And technically speaking, a lot of MOT stations in the UK, at least if you're watching here, will allow you to have these mounted on the bike without anything on the back because they can be seen from behind. I like a pair of barrel grips. This is not for me about looking all trendy, but these built well barrel-shaped grips, they give you more grip, which is what grips are supposed to do. And the fact that they're bigger in the middle, it's a little bit like gearing. It's almost like having a bigger back sprocket. You get a little bit more torque in your hand when you grip the bar. So not only do they look kind of cool and a bit old school, certainly to me and to my brain and for how I ride, these actually give me a little bit more turn on the throttle, and they're just nicer to hang on to than straight through grips. So that's the front end. Moving sort of downwards to the bike, the engine's untouched. Royal Enfield do some big bore kits. They have a 750 kit, and I was kind of hoping they might accidentally slip one onto this bike, but they chose not to because they believe in the engine as it is, and also they didn't want to do too much modification in terms of ECU and other stuff. So the engine is exactly standard, which is fine by me because it's also been graced by this rather beautiful S&S Performance Parts race pipe. And this is a 2-into-1 system. which they've actually built for their flat track race series. It's been Cerakoted black, and also they've modified the angle of the connection here. Because the guys at Royal Enfield, and Adrian and Rahul in particular, they're very, very pernickety about lines. And when you look at designs of beautiful motorcycles, you'll realise the angle of the front forks is the same as the angle of the down tubes on the subframe. You know, the front of the cradle will be the same as the down tubes at the front part. There's a lot of parallel lines going on a bike like this, and they wanted to make sure that all of this lined up, even to the point of chopping this rear footrest bracket off, reshaping it, welding it back on at the same angle as the exhaust, because they wanted it to look right. And to me, actually, that's the kind of stuff I really like about a good quality custom build, is people going to those extra lengths just to make sure the aesthetics are right. The other thing that they've done in terms of sort of simplifying the bike and making everything nice and clean is this rear shock by Hagen. It's obviously a modern component from a modern company that make modern gear. I'm pretty sure it's a progressive spring in there, although I haven't checked and I do need to look at the spec. But it's simply a shrouded spring, and it just looks a little bit cooler. It's a bit old school. It's a little bit like an old school Enfield or a really old school Triumph where you can't see the spring, and it's basically just covering the spring up. You don't need to see it. And to me, it emulates the front end. It's almost like a reverse of the front fork. And to me, it's a really tidy looking thing on a bike that's full of curves and classic lines. There's no piggyback reservoir on there to look all racy. This isn't pretending to be some sort of sports and performance bike. This is a bike for blatting around London on. So I really like this. And also, it's going to keep the spring clean. So other than that, obviously, there's been quite a few changes around the back end of this bike. The tank is completely standard. It was a beautiful thing in the first place, and you'll see these on the standard bike. And really what they've done for the back end is done the obvious custom thing that most people do, what they call the chop and loop, where they've chopped off the end of the rear subframe, put a new loop on the back, and then created a new seat pan that's then been upholstered. And this has been done really beautifully. And sometimes for me, this is the thing that really makes a custom bike succeed or fail at the back end of a build. It's all about where it stops, it's all about where the frame is. Quite often you want it to just be a little bit overhanging the central spindle, and you don't want the rear mudguard to go too far past the rear rim of the wheel for a really nice aesthetic look that matches a tucked in front end. When they first built this bike, you'll have seen on one of the early reports, they had a skinnier piece of tubing here, which actually matched what was there originally, but they put on a fatter piece just to really preserve the chunkiness that this bike has. And also they Frenched in an LED light at the back here, and this is the stop and brake lights. There are no indicators because of the bar end indicators at the front. I promise you all of this is bright enough to be seen. It's also safe and it is legal. The other thing that I would get to, which Dan may not have shown yet, if you come around this end, Dan, this does have a side-mounted number plate. I've never had one of these before. Hopefully I'm not going to catch it while I'm filtering, but I do like the way it allows the back end to look really, really tidy. And I mean, the only good thing about having a number plate hanging here is I always think of number plates as not really part of the motorcycle, and it does act as an extra bit of mudguard without having a mudguard. So let's see how much spray I get up at the back of my jacket on a rainy day. But to be honest, this is probably a bit of a fair weather bike because I hate washing bikes. So what else can I say about the bike that is really about the build? Probably not a lot, and we should talk a little bit about the aesthetics. My normal taste for a custom motorcycle is paint everything black, probably matte black, and then have all the metal parts silver and metal coloured if that's what they're made of. And obviously for a sort of a custom show bike build that's a collaboration between two brands and that would look good in photos, I needed to be a little bit more flexible than that. So we went for this kind of two-colour job where we've got sort of this sort of almost dark primer grey front and a sort of more classic metallic silver at the back, split by the Bike Shed logo with the Bike Shed yellow line down the middle. And what Adrian and sort of his design aesthetics brought to that were putting more splits into other places. And if you saw the other video, you'll see that they had this concept of this line that cuts through the engine, mirrored again on the front of the engine case, and then also on the side panels you've got this line that cuts through that way and matches up the contrast between the painted fins and the non-painted fins in the upper part of the engine. That's the kind of thing that I wouldn't normally do, and I'm happy they did it. It makes the bike stand out. If I'd built this myself, it would just be all black. The other thing that a lot of people have commented on and seen is the slightly 80s sort of style, you know, open in emergency on the side, and that is because inside here, as a lot of you may have seen on previous videos, there is indeed proper emergency supplies available to me. I do like a little bit of Scotch whisky, and so that is my choice of tipple. This is where Dan might put up a warning that says don't drink and ride. So this is clearly for when I've arrived at the campsite and it's time to warm myself around an open fire. But I just think this is a really nice touch. And again, the kind of thing you do on a show bike and not the kind of thing I do on my own normal personal ride. Having said that, this bike is going to be my normal personal ride. So I am going to be riding around London on it, looking a little bit louder than I would normally look, which is why it has a set of rear pillion footrests, because I wanted a seat that was big enough to put Vicky on the back of and be comfortable and allow her to sit on the back when she can't be bothered to ride her bikes, which is quite frequently. So this is a proper practical 2-up town bike for commuting. And the only thing we really need to do now is ride the thing. I genuinely haven't ridden this. Whenever we do these reviews, Dan always says, hold up, wait, don't ride the bike. I want to see your genuine reaction, don't fake it. And I've just about managed to do that. Luckily, the weather's been crap, and until a few days ago, I didn't have a number plate, so I haven't been able to ride the bike. But now, that is exactly what we're going to do. But before we do that, I'm going to turn the bike on because Dan's probably sitting there filming, wondering why I haven't shown everybody what the lighting looks like. So I've got the key in my pocket. One of the small things that they've given up to modern technology is that it's got an RFID key, which turns everything on by just waving around. And you can see the very bright indicators that are good from the front or the back. I'll flip them onto the other side. So these are obviously perfectly good for the job, and in fact I'd say those are possibly the best kind of indicators you could have on any motorcycle, because people really do know which way you're going at the widest point of the vehicle. The Speedo, while it's tiny, it does have everything you need on it, and in fact you can cycle through all the things with this tiny little button they've mounted on the bar here. So although it's kind of modest and small, it has all the functionality of the original bike. And the good thing actually about the Royal Enfields is they don't have CAN bus. So you can just put these kind of products in without having really complex electronics in the middle. And then finally the halo headlight at the front. Actually I say finally, but you haven't looked at the back yet. But the halo headlight at the front, these look good when they're on low beam, nice and easy to see. It's a cool looking thing, kind of modern retro, so I'm a fan of that. And Dan, if you want to hoik yourself around to the back, that super tiny LED, it is actually bright. I've ridden bikes with this particular LED in before, and whilst I don't know how well the camera picks it up, but this is perfectly good even for doing dodgy late night right turns on the Holloway Road, which is 2 lanes, where the road isn't very well lit where I live, and the last thing I want is somebody driving into the back of me because they haven't noticed I've stopped or that I'm turning. So with this at the back and with this on the side, I'm quite happy that I've got a safe bike to ride at night, and also with that halo at the front end, I know I'm going to get a good view of the road as well. So I think I've pretty much covered anything. Dan can always wave at me, edit some stuff in, make me look a little bit clever than I did before, but I think I've talked about the whole bike. And I think what remains for us to do now is to get on it and ride it, and you're going to get my real first reaction. Finally, the moment of truth. I'm literally, genuinely about to get on this motorcycle for the first time. As far as I know, it hasn't turned a wheel. No one's ridden it, not even the guys at Royal Enfield. So let's hopefully they pressed all the right buttons and tightened up all the bolts. I've got to go and get some fuel as well. So Dan's rigged me up with cameras on my crash helmet, cameras on the bike. Hopefully we'll end up creating some good video. Hopefully you can hear me because there's a mic in this helmet. We have no idea what we're doing, but if it works, we'll do a lot more reports like this as we go. See you in a bit. It's a good start. So far so good. That's the first time I've let the clutch out on this bike with the bike in gear, so I had no idea how it was going to feel, didn't know where the biting point was, didn't know how the brakes were going to be, but actually what's really nice is it just feels like a motorcycle. The riding position's really natural. It was really easy to get on with. Biting point was a little bit later than I expected, so I might adjust that on the lever, which is the nice thing about old school adjustable levers. And in terms of pulling away in first gear, it certainly did exactly what I expected it to do. One of the things I'm interested in is will I want to change the gearing on this bike? So far, so good. It sounds fantastic, and everyone's looking to see what this exotic, strange, noisy creature is, so that's a good start. Some people say loud bikes with gaudy paint are a little bit too much, but I like the fact that people are looking at me and I'm less likely to have somebody do a U-turn on me or have a cyclist pull out in front of me. So to me, that's all good. So the next part of my journey is pretty boring. I'm off to get some fuel. I've got to negotiate stupid traffic, the Old Street roundabout, which has been completely destroyed by TfL's new routing. It's no longer a roundabout. It's now a whole bunch of traffic lights, which is completely pointless. And then there's a garage on just the other side. And then I'll see if I can find some interesting roads to ride around, even though we're in the middle of London. Taxi driver's pulled forward so he can get a better look at the bike. I like that. It's a good sign. And we're off. I have to remind myself these tyres are brand new, so they've still got the releasing agent on them that makes them a little bit slippery, so hopefully I'll remember not to give it the beans going round any corners while I'm trying to show off on camera, just in case I come a cropper. Oh, you see, love those wide bars. Proper urban commuter. And in to get some fuel in pretty much the only garage in this part of town, so good, straight to a pump. And I have no idea how to get the fuel cap off, so let's see if I mess that one up. I also have to turn the bike off with the RFID, which is something I hadn't really thought about, so fishing around, that's good. So, first ever fueling. Well, no one stole the bike. That's always a bonus in this part of London. Still here when you get back to it. You may think I'm joking, but scroats around here do steal motorcycles from petrol station forecourts. Oh, that sounds lovely, doesn't it? Okay, let's go play. Nice wide bars, easy to move around. He missed the light, I'm not gonna. I did, however, bump my side-mounted number plate doing that. Note to self, this bike is wider on the left than it is on the right. Well, the riding position's perfect. It's really comfortable. Handlebars, perfectly positioned. That big fat front tyre is completely invisible in terms of how it steers. If this had, if somebody told me I was riding a bike with a 17-inch front wheel on it, I'd believe them. Well, maybe an 18, I don't know, but it certainly doesn't feel hard to turn, despite the big fat front, which is what we hoped and expected, but obviously wasn't tested until now. I've now got a sense of how much to rev it when I let the clutch out and where the biting point is. And for a 650 twin that's probably only sticking out about 50 brake horsepower, it feels really nice. It's punchy. I can't say it's fast. This is not a fast motorcycle, but it's got torque and it has got power and it feels like a proper machine. So far I'm having a really good time. One thing I can comment on is this bike definitely feels more rapid, more torquey, and more powerful than its standard cousin, the normal 650 twin, which is to be expected with the S&S pipes and probably about a 20 to 25 kilo weight loss. And it likes being short shifted. Now normally some of my favourite corners here for taking really nice photographs of the bike on full lean But on brand new tyres, which have still got all the sealant on them, I'm going to take it a little bit easy. These tyres have literally done 2 miles and London's roads are greasy, so cautious cornering. That girl seems to have forgotten her clothes. Talking out loud when you're riding or driving is not a good idea. The one thing I would say, which I don't know if there's a solution to, is the leather on this seat is quite slippery. So even though the seat is contoured with studs, every time I accelerate away from the traffic lights, I do slide back a little bit on the seat, so I'm having to grip with my knees, and it's meaning I pull away more slowly than I would otherwise intend to. So I don't know if I just need to wear the seat in a little bit. Maybe it's all a bit too new and polished and shiny. It's not bad. I've had vinyl seats that are much more slippery than this, but definitely something to note. I knew a courier who used to pour Coca-Cola on the seat of his motorcycles to keep himself sticking to the bottom of them. I won't be doing that. Dan, I hope you can edit my verbiage into something vaguely interesting, assuming you can hear me. So I'm riding up through Islington now. It's nice to see people about, despite Tier 2. We need humans. We need to be safe in the virus, but we also need trade, and we need humanity, and London needs some of its vibe back. Right, we have a confused learner who doesn't know where she's going. Oh well, I guess we were all learners once. I'm going to hijack the turn. If any of you who are watching this are shocked by my riding, it's because you're not Londoners. This is how we get around in London. There's a sort of polite rebellion where you don't piss people off, but you definitely take advantage of gaps. And if you've got the space, you just do it. A nice little bit of backfire on the change down. Who doesn't love that? This is just fun. Fun is a very underused word in motorcycling, but at the end of the day, riding a motorcycle should be fun. It should put a grin on your face. You should enjoy doing it. You should be glad you're on 2 wheels. And if you're having fun, to me that ticks the most important box. Whether you're doing a track day on an R1 and you're doing 180 miles an hour up the back straight, or whether you're scooting around London on a low powered single, if you've got a grin on your face and you're having fun, the job has been done. Well, the fueling is certainly entirely uncompromised by the exhaust system. They told me they didn't do anything special, there was no remapping, and the air filters haven't been played about with. I do plan on fitting a DNA air filter, and at some point I would like to play around with maybe a power commander and some maps. Hello mate. And we'll see what that does. I'm sure there are a few more horses available. I'd be also interested to see what the bike feels like with a slightly smaller front sprocket, just to make the first 2 gears a little bit more lively for this kind of town riding. I don't need sustained top speeds on a bike like this. I doubt I'll ever go much more than about 75-80 miles an hour on any journey, so might play around with that. Well, still having a good time and enjoying the chaos of London's traffic. No one really knows where they're going or what they're doing. As you see, we are in Motorcycle City. It is the best way of getting around, if not the only way of getting around. And as you'll see, only the motorcyclists really know how to use the road, whilst we all divide and conquer. Being loud helps, and being very observant helps even more. Well, I've arrived back at the bike shed, and the big test of this bike is the fact that although I did a little loop and got some fuel, I want to keep going. I want to ride past. I promised I'd only be got about 10 or 15 minutes, but I need a little bit more time on this bike because I'm having a really nice time. And as I said, if a bike is fun and it makes you smile, it's ticked all the most important boxes. And this bike is ticking all the boxes. It's fun, it's punchy, it's lightweight, it steers well. Suspension's really nice because I'm not noticing it. London's roads are crap. Bits of gravel, speed bumps, potholes. Quite often when you're riding around London, you're anticipating, here's a speed bump. You're anticipating every speed bump, pothole, weighting the pegs. This bike is doing a surprisingly good job of just being a motorcycle. So it's got retro looks, old school engine with fins on it. Looks like it's air cooled, but it's not. But I'm just riding it. I'm not thinking about it. I'm not having to manage anything about it. That's all a little bit more analog than you'd want it to be. I think maybe we're in a golden era of motorcycling where you get the analog experience with a little bit of digital help from ECUs and bikes that fuel properly, whatever the temperature, that start first time with decent batteries that don't run out of charge. But on the other hand, they give you that old school feeling. I actually don't know where I'm going, just making it up as I go along, but why not? We're in the middle of Shoreditch, up around the area near Brick Lane. Lots of tourists around here who love taking photos of themselves against all the graffiti. I'm going to just pop down here. This is where Rebels Alliance are. They're probably not open because, we're in the middle of lockdown and it's all a bit shit and no one's out and about. No, Rebel Alliance. Wow, is that Rebel Alliance? Have they gone? That would be very sad. So I think I'm still on a two-way street. So we're now going onto the infamous Brick Lane. The surface here is shocking. Cobbles, speed bumps, broken bits of road, been repaired hundreds of times over the last 50, 60 years without anybody resurfacing it properly. Loads of people, not enough room. The perfect bike for the job. This is definitely a Brick Lane bike. This is also where all the Indian restaurants are. This is where India meets London in East London. And that's really what this build is all about. This is all about British heritage reinvented in India, and something there's nothing more English and more London than Indian meal. And perhaps there's nothing more British than a British brand that has been rebuilt in India. They've done a great job. I really like this bike. I'm having a good time. London style, hanging out in the middle of the road despite the fact that the lights have gone green. No, I want to go up here and so does he, but I'm on a motorbike, so let's not try and kill any cyclists. Nope, we're good. Excellent. Beep beep. Sorry mate. And that is the other thing you need to look out for if you're in London. Pedestrians who are not paying attention. Super bright indicator, everyone can see what I'm doing. A nice easy right turn back onto Shoreditch High Street. This bike is ticking all the boxes. Thank you, mate. Big bright indicators and act like a bicycle. Are you going straight or left? Are you going straight or left?
Go left to the bison.
Perfect. I didn't want to cut you off.
No.
Yeah, see ya. And super slow down the drive, or Vicky will tell me off. Yo. It's really good. I'm thinking of calling it the Staffy. It's like a blue Staffy, small but angry and muscular. I get in trouble from Vicky. That was epic. downward. I'm probably still on. So the camera's pointing at me. Hold on. Hold the camera at me. That was brilliant. Really enjoyed the bike. It's a motorcycle. You get on it, handlebars are where you want them to be, footrests are where you want them to be, you let the clutch out, the bike goes, it makes the best noises, and I've come back with a big grin on my face. Every box ticked. Nothing to see here. So that wraps up the third part of the Bike Shed Royal Enfield Collaboration 650 build. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and watch more Bike Shed videos on YouTube.